Welcome, everyone, to the cultural impact of this political moment. We're so happy to be here. We're so happy to be with you. I'd like to briefly introduce myself. I'm Cheryl Contee. I'm the CEO of Do Big Things. Do Big Things works with the world's leading causes and campaigns to provide the new narrative and new tech for the new era in which we all sense we're living. I'm joined by the amazing Rob Shepardson and the incandescent Lenny Stern. Rob, I'd love to pass it over to you to introduce yourself.
Great, thanks, Cheryl. I'm Rob Shepardson, and along with Lenny, I'm one of the co-founders of SS+K in New York City, a marketing and advertising agency that has worked in politics and cause-related and nonprofit work, as well as for a variety of corporations over our 27 years. And we like to think that we help brands through change, which is quite relevant right now. I'll pass it to my friend and co-founder, Lenny.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much. So excited to be here and chat with everyone. The only thing I would add is at the heart of the agency that Rob and myself founded is taking the lessons we learned from politics and policy and applying them to businesses and brands in today's very much changing environment. And it's more topical and more relevant now than ever, and we're super excited to chat with
you. Absolutely. Thank you, gentlemen. Well, let's dig into our topic, which is the cultural impact of this political moment. I don't know if you guys have heard that there's an election this year, the 2020 election.
Yes.
Something's happening there.
Somewhere along the way.
Yeah, many people think that it's a referendum on the future of America itself. And whatever the result, the campaign itself is sending shockwaves we can all feel across our culture. And today we'd like to explore the impact that this heated election cycle is having on marketing and creative expression, the public's perception of the value of diversity and inclusion, and the complicated future of our industry in an increasingly divided America. Now, we wrote that 4 months ago when we were applying to speak in front of you at the 3% conference. And that was in the early days of COVID. That was prior to George Floyd and the BLM protests. And while even then, the country was certainly already polarized and deep inequities were bubbling through the surface, and there's new awareness of that, 4 months ago seems like a lifetime ago. I mean, like hundreds of years ago now. So, just because the sociocultural movement we're living in right now feels unprecedented to, I think, all of us. There's no one in the globe right now who's untouched by what's happening right now. Over the next 15 minutes, we're going to discuss the implications of this moment. What's the significance of the political moment we're living through right now for us as marketers, and the brands with whom we partner to reach millions of people. So if you don't mind, I'll kick things off. My take is that for Trump and many of his supporters, the politics is the personal. And I come from Black culture. I identify as an African-American woman, and I would say for Black people, politics has always been personal. Black women vote basically at a 70% rate, which is the highest in the nation. So we understand that. And I think what's different now is that personalization is now almost universal. From the forces of Trump on one side and Black Lives Matter on the other, everyone feels that politics isn't just politics. It's really about culture, as defined by morals, values, beliefs. And so just taking a step back and really, also bringing it to our world, how do creative communicators respond to that, given that our traditional cultural influence and ability to touch so many people in their homes, on their phones, is so very powerful. Lenny, do you have thoughts on that?
Sure. Thanks so much, Cheryl. You know, it's interesting. Every 4 years, you hear that a presidential election is a referendum on the future of America. But as Cheryl noted, now more than ever, with the backdrop of a pandemic, the economic crisis, and a social justice reckoning, in many ways, from our collective point of view, this election and this moment is more a referendum on our values and our actions, not just as a country, but for all institutions, for businesses, for agencies that we all work at or for, and for everyday Americans. And in many ways, I think that this moment has created a higher bar that's both a challenge, but also an incredible opportunity for us as agency leaders and business leaders and human beings. We've seen a shift in this moment from words to actions, from conveying just that you simply get it, to actually demonstrating you're doing something about it and you're trying to be part of the solution. And there's an old adage that you can't communicate yourself out of a problem that you behaved yourself into. And I think we as a country, as an industry, are all recognizing we behaved ourselves into a problem. We're going to have to act and do something about it. And it's not enough for brands, agencies, businesses we work with or for to signal their values. But we've got to demonstrate through action who we are, what we are, who we hire, how we hire, the products we bring to market, the experiences we create, the people we support, and the partners we do business with. And I think that's an enormous reckoning for us as leaders. I think you see it now. Nike and others, you know, stop selling Redskins paraphernalia. And that was an action. It wasn't just a commitment of getting it, but it was doing it. And I think all of us have an opportunity and obligation to start doing more and talking less.
Thanks, Lenny. Rob, what are your thoughts?
Well, you know, when you think about this election, our country has had the singular misfortune of having the worst president in modern history at a time when we needed leadership more than ever before through this crisis. And the challenges that we've seen in the last 6 months or so, and you were enumerating them, Cheryl, any one of them would have been potentially transformative. And we've had all of them at the same time, and this consciousness raising that we've seen and that we've lived through, that we've talked about, is something that I think agencies have a particular talent and opportunity in capturing. And we are supposed to be expert at communications. We are supposed to be experts at creating emotional feelings in our target audiences that we communicate with. And that's extremely powerful. That sort of creative communications can make people think about problems differently. They can make people challenge their assumptions. They can make them think of possibilities that maybe they never had thought of before. We've seen it recently. You know, we've seen now these Confederate statues go down. And remember, you know, with the tragedy at Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston a number of years ago, you know, John Calhoun's statue did not come down in Charleston. Now it did. And the Mississippi state flag has now taken off that Confederate battle flag. That did not happen before. And there is an opportunity that agencies can help people think differently about what it is that we're going through and bring people together through their work, through their creativity. And I think that's an opportunity that we have as agencies. Even if you're advertising a consumer packaged goods, you know, you may be limited in what you can do, but you might have opportunities to do some other work with advocacy groups, with pro bono groups, with political groups, and it could be local. Local is as important as the national level, because because we need to change everything. And the fundamental point here is we have that opportunity, but it is going to take time. This is a long slog. This is something that we need to dedicate ourselves to. You know, Barack Obama, our former boss, said recently on a Zoom fundraiser, he said, look, the energy that we've seen in the streets won't easily translate into action. Don't assume that it will. And we need to continually communicate, continually inspire people through our creativity so that people really can see a pathway towards changing the systemic racism and discrimination and inequity that exists and is so horrific for so many people.
Thank you, Rob. Yeah, just briefly, you know, when you see the Confederate generals coming down, I think that people want new heroes, right? They want new leaders. They want a different archetype, you know, and they're choosing a, you know, you might say a primitive way of doing it, just physically pulling it down. But I do think that marketers can tap into that vibe of, you know, people wanting to see new heroes and new leaders, you know, express different values. Just quickly, there's a 15 weeks left until the election. And, you know, when people like Trump are feeling powerless, they often seek a way to assert their power. And, you know, so another shoe may drop. So what do we think the future will hold? Lenny, what are your thoughts?
Well, I guess I have two quick thoughts on that. One builds on something Rob said. I think the future is going to happen in accelerated speed. What I mean by that is we study both consumer insights, but also cultural insights. And one of them is something we call social forces. And there's one social force that's out there called on the cusp, which is about this moment in time prior to all of this, that everybody felt so much change was about to happen or could happen. But people thought about it as a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, the world would dramatically change. These triple tragedies and challenges have created an accelerated challenge and opportunity to this change. So one thing is more change, quicker, faster. The second part is this election is going to create a crisis of truth and sort of action, because I think that election day is going to be election week or election month. The election results are going to be challenged. Institutions, companies, creative people like ourselves are going to be asked and expected to play a role in ensuring that the integrity of the process is preserved and protected. So acceleration of change and integrity to the process and to the truth, and the obligation we all have to support that.
Absolutely. Rob, briefly?
You know, I think that the one of the biggest enduring problems that we face as a country that inhibits our ability to solve some of these problems is the polarization that has existed and that still exists right now. And that's something that all companies, all agencies, and everybody has an opportunity to try to diminish and try to work on. And again, I think that agencies have a particular standing to try to fight that. We can create new norms for people. We can advocate inside our clients. We, after all, work for the communications and advertising and creative people inside a lot of our clients, and they are the ones that have an outsized influence on a lot of times how companies behave. And you see now companies behaving. There was a piece written recently in the Harvard Business Review that it's a dawning of a new era of corporate social activism. And you see now companies that are standing up for, as you said, Cheryl, these values, taking action internally, externally, across the board. And we can begin to advocate and push our clients to have different standards, to behave differently, so that we can create a 21st century private sector and economy, if you will, that is going to be more inclusive, that is going to hold out more opportunity. It's not going to solve everything, but we do have, I believe, outsized influence in what we can do. And if we can fight polarization and we can create new norms inside our companies and in our clients, we will be well on our way to making substantial change.
Thank you so much. I'll just close us out really briefly and say I agree with both of you, and I'm going to check out that article. In this moment, to me, is ultimately about values. What do you believe is important right now, going forward, for your survival and for society's survival? And we have seen that what happens in Wuhan or Italy or Georgia impacts us all. Just trying to solve these problems as a nation or as a state isn't working. And whether it's justice, education, climate change, health, these are global issues that we have to solve together. And I think that brands that chart positivity and togetherness will succeed in the future. As I mentioned, I come from Black culture. We worked with orgs like NAACP, Color of Change, Movement for Black Lives, Leadership Council, but also Naleo, Presente, etc. And I know that Black people are futuristic and optimistic, in part because history has not given us a choice. And our testing on certain issues, is bearing out that people want and need positive messages now. So I hope that all of you will send out positive messages today and in the future, in this moment. And we thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Terrific.